ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is my top 10 favorite cult movies of all time. This is my personal opinion. I don't base it off anybody else's opinion that's on the internet right now. I want to make something very, very clear to you, the audience, on what a cult film is. Cult film is a movie that didn't make really shit in the box office when it first came out, but gained a stature that establishes it as a great film at least 10 years after the fact that when it was released. Ginger Snaps. From the first scene of the film, it sets up the entire film. From the beginning, immediately immense. One of my favorite movies. I love this film. I mean, come on. It opens up with the two main characters, the two girls, making suicide films. It's so great, and the whole aspect that it takes basically the premise of An American Werewolf in London. It's the best werewolf film since, or it's the best werewolf film since An American Werewolf in London. The reason why it is because in the film, when one of the sisters gets bit by a wolf, she doesn't just automatically transform into a werewolf. She transforms into a beautiful woman, and then creates the horror and the terror in the film. Fantastic movie. You guys ought to check it out. Maniac. What else could be said about this movie that isn't said in the head explosion scene involving Tom Savini in the car? The premise of the film is a serial killer decides to stalk and terrorize women when he builds his own mannequins inside his room. He has them all laid out. It's just disturbing, it's bloody, it's everything that you could ever want from a cult horror film. Let the Right One In. Come on. Apart from not only being one of the best horror films of the past 10 years of the 2000s, it's simply one of the best vampire films ever. It deserves to be up there with Dracula, with all the other great vampire films that have come that deserve to be mentioned. You know, not that fucking bullshit Twilight shit. This is real vampirism at its finest, and not a whole lot of people, not as many people know about this film as they should. I recommend it. I do recommend this movie. Number 7, Dazed and Confused. What else can be said about this movie that hasn't been said? A lot of people know about it, but they don't know that when it was first released, it bombed at the box office. It has become an immense classic now because of the fact that you're taking teenagers who grew up in the 70s. It shows their whole last day of high school, the whole high school experience, and their very last day, from the drugs, the partying, and all the great fucking music in the movie. You've got Alice Cooper, you've got Thin Lizzy, you've got Black Sabbath, you've got Kiss, you've got Zeppelin in the film. This is a teenage classic. If you're a teenager and you've never seen Dazed and Confused, do yourself a favor, go check it out. Number 6. Now, number 6 was going to be Dazed and Confused, but I had to put one film above it that doesn't get the recognition it deserves. It's easily one of the creepiest and most unsettling films ever made. This movie is called Audition. Audition is just grim. It's so beautifully shot. The first 45 minutes to an hour of the film build up and set the tension for the film. After that fact, what happens after maybe an hour into the film just will literally freak anybody out. Anyone. It's a disturbing movie to watch. But it does deserve recognition. And the reason why is it builds a tightrope, a tension. It just, it sets an enormous, psychological, terrifying tone. It's something that some of us can actually relate to. The fact that the whole premise of the film is a guy who loses his wife, wants to find the right girl to marry, and holds an audition. He finds this girl that he likes, and she's so lovable and so, nice and petite, and just seems like a great woman for him. But he doesn't realize that she's a mass-murdering serial killer until he calls her and she looks at the phone. And you realize she is a psychopath. She's demented. And the last half an hour of the film, you almost literally cannot look at the screen. If you want a good film that will freak you out, Audition is sure to do it. Number 5, Clerks Mallrats. Could not decide what film to put in the number 5 spot. So I put both of them. Kevin Smith, he's one of my directing heroes. He takes premises that are just, everyday life premises from his point of view, and he puts them on a film. Clerks, Dante and Randall, the two main characters, own this store called the Quick Stop. Outside of the Quick Stop, we get introduced to two other characters which would become synonymous with almost all of Kevin Smith's films, except Cop Out and Jersey Girl and Tusk and Red State. But it's so brilliant, it's so amazingly funny that any kid who has never seen Clerks or Mallrats needs to see this movie. Cannot say enough great things about not only these two films, but almost every film that Kevin Smith has done. And Tusk will be it'll be described at another time, in another video. Number 4, the greatest Midnight Madness film ever created. If you are a cult movie fan and you don't know about the Rocky Horror Picture Show, you might as well just stop calling yourself a cult movie fan. This is the definition of what a cult film is. Doesn't really make a whole lot of money in the box office when it gets initially released, but has such a fandom and base that it can be felt 36 years later. That is the definition of a great cult film. And the Rocky Horror Picture Show sure as hell is a great cult film. What could be better than the Rocky Horror Picture Show? The last 3 films, in my personal opinion, on this list. Number 3, Bubba Hotep. It doesn't get the recognition it deserves rather than what number one is. But for all Bruce Campbell fans, this is definitive Bruce Campbell. I mean, he plays the king. He plays an old Elvis Presley in what is presumed to be, an old people's home. And he does it so brilliantly. This is Bruce Campbell in one of his best roles. Now, for all you Bruce Campbell fans, I just gave you a notice in what number one is. And Ossie Davis is great too. Number two, Stanley Kubrick. This a part of not only being one of the most, if not the most notorious film ever made, is simply one of the best films ever made. It's one of the best films I certainly have ever seen, in my personal opinion. It is my favorite film of all time. Now, me saying that it's my favorite film of all time and having it number two, I've got to explain this, because what number one is just, to me, the best cult film. No, the best cult films ever made. And A Clockwork Orange, it's really, really, really violent. I mean, there have been more violent films, that have come out, like The Human Centipede and Serbian film, but this was the standard bearer for it. And it was so controversial that Stanley Kubrick, went to the studio after he'd started getting death threats from people in London, where he was living in the UK, that he asked the studio to pull it from distribution after a year and a half, 2 years of it being in distribution in the United Kingdom. No other filmmaker has dared ever do that, but he had to protect his family. It's so brilliant, so iconic. I mean, Malcolm McDowell is Alex. That poster of his eyelashes and him looking out of the triangle with the knife is such an iconic. It's one of the most iconic movie posters ever, and it deserves its cult status. I gave you Bruce Campbell fans a glimpse of what number one is. It's not just the original, it's not just two, it's not the third film, but it's the entire trilogy. I cannot put one film in this trilogy above the other, because they all, to me, are great. This is the number one cult film, in my personal opinion. This is The Evil Dead. You want to talk about what makes a great cult film, what makes a great director who makes a cult film and goes on to the stature of making big, huge Hollywood films. Sam Raimi set the standard. In 1980, he releases The Evil Dead, which was his major adaptation of a film that he made in the late 70s called Within the Woods. Or Into the Woods. I gotta look that one up. But it establishes the greatest cult movie actor ever, which is Bruce Campbell. He's not only the greatest cult movie actor, but a B legend, a B movie legend. Evil Dead is a cult film because of the main horror aspects in it. Evil Dead 2: Dead by Dawn is a cult film. It is a massive, major cult film because it establishes Bruce Campbell not just as a horror star, but a horror comedy legend who comes up with these one-liners that have become synonymous with a lot of horror films that you see today, especially horror comedies like Zombieland and Shaun of the Dead. Both of them took immense influence from Evil Dead 2. And Army of Darkness, it's not really a cult horror film. It's a cult comedy classic that not enough people know about. And Bruce Campbell yet again just spouts off these one-liners that are some of the greatest ever. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is my list of the top 10 cult films of all time, in my personal opinion. And tell me what you think in the comments below, right down there.